Demystifying Cryptocurrency for Faith-Based Fundraisers. It's sponsored by the Catholic Development Council, part of the Nonprofit Alliance. And we're really excited to have you all here and diving into this question. We've heard a lot of questions about it recently. We have our panel of, nobody wants to call themselves a cryptocurrency expert these days. So we will not call you that. We will call you people who have danced with cryptocurrency and have some familiarity with cryptocurrency, and excited to have you here. As you can see on our screen, we have Jim Friend, Director of Mission Advancement at St. John Vianney Center. Welcome, Jim. And we have Joe Gillmer, Executive Director of Development for the Archdiocese of Washington. Welcome, Joe. We're excited to have you here. As many of you know, and we kept Rachel's picture here, Rachel Earle played a big role in planning this and putting it together. A lot of her expertise is reflected in the slides. Unfortunately, she had a family situation and is not able to be with us today, but I'm sure we will tap into her in the future and get much of her insights here with us today and even more in the future. So excited to have you guys here. Just this is a lot of words, but really, why are we here today? Cryptocurrency. We hear that word, we hear it in the news, we hear other fundraisers talking about it, and we don't always know what we mean. It's one of these new things. So wanting to clarify, wanting everybody to feel on solid ground about cryptocurrency and what it is and how it might impact our work. Also, many people are using cryptocurrency, and it's becoming common for donors to ask nonprofits if they're accepting cryptocurrency. So as good fundraisers who want to put our donors' money to good uses, we would like to be able to accept it however they would want to give it. So again, getting on that page of understanding what the potential is. And then the nonprofits, we have board members asking us, so who own cryptocurrency, who have heard of it in the news, who are saying, what are we doing about cryptocurrency? So really today is meant as that introduction, get everybody on the same page, start to think about what cryptocurrency means for us, what it means for fundraisers, for our organizations, and in particular, looking at it through a faith-based lens. So our agenda for today, take a brief background on cryptocurrency and what it can be as a charitable asset, really look at some of the experiences and knowledge from our panelists, how they've approached crypto, what they know about cryptocurrency and donation platforms. And then we really do want to have a Q&A with you all. So thank you, Trey, for letting us know that the chat is turned off. We're going to ask you to raise your hand, jot down your notes to yourself. We have time set aside in the agenda really to ask some questions and to think about what this means for your particular situation. So be ready with those, raise your hand, we'll call on you, and you can actually ask your question. The other quick thing to mention is that next Thursday, June 29th at 10 a.m., Catholic Development Council hosts a monthly coffee talk, and we did commit this one to be focused on cryptocurrency. In fact, a lot of the questions and agitation for something around cryptocurrency to help came from those coffee talks. So we invite you to join that coffee talk next week for even more conversation, hearing from your peers about how they are using it. I would also flag that you can use closed caption if that is helpful for you to be able to read at the bottom. Somewhere on your Zoom screen at the top or the bottom is a button that says CC or closed captions. And if that helps you understand what everybody's saying, please do turn that on. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists.
Well, thank you, Abby. I'm going to go ahead and get started and cover the first couple of slides, and then I'll kick it over to Joe, and we're just going to pass it back and forth here. Our goal is to kind of move through a lot of this information relatively quickly so that we can have plenty of time for conversation and questions at the very end. And I'm looking forward to learning from all of you, and as much as hopefully you're looking forward to learning from the two of us. I think we're all encouraged to be students, lifelong learners, if you will. In all of this, and face it, for many of us, this wasn't around when we were in college, so we're learning as we go, and so I look forward to learning through this discussion. So what is cryptocurrency? And as Abby said, there's a lot of text on some of these slides, so we're going to try to digest it for you quickly. And Abby, will these slides be available to our folks who attended afterwards? They will, so you'll be able to kind of pour through these and kind of analyze the numbers and some of the text afterwards. But cryptocurrency essentially is a digital asset that can circulate without a centralized authority, meaning a bank. So banks are not big fans of cryptocurrency because it basically eliminates the middleman. You can send a cryptocurrency. I could have a digital wallet and you could have a digital wallet, and I could send that asset to you without any kind of a middle person. It might take a matter of seconds. It might take a couple of minutes, but we would not need a bank to be that middle person. Currently, according to Forbes, just last week, there are over 25,000 cryptocurrency projects out there. And I will tell you, just from my own experience and from listening to the experts, 98% of those crypto projects are probably going to go to a value of 0 before this is all said and done. There are so many scams out there. And maybe I should also say at the top of this, if you get some information from us or you glean some information from this webinar, remember, this is not financial advice. So if you decide to go out and buy crypto or buy a Bitcoin or something afterwards, that is your risk. And please always be aware of your risk tolerance whenever you're making some kind of an investment. But that being said, so you have to be careful because there are so many different projects out there. Cryptocurrency is valued in either coins or tokens. So a coin would be something that is off of a blockchain, like a Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's a larger coin with a decentralized system. Tokens usually exist within the ecosystem of a coin, like a Bitcoin, or there's many different kinds of tokens that exist on the platform of Ethereum. Why don't we go to the next slide? So that's basically what it is. It's digital currency that can be sent without a middle person involved. Now, Bitcoin and the birth of crypto began way back in the 1980s. We probably didn't hear of it back then, but it really took flight after the Great Recession or the Great Financial Crisis of 2008. The money printer, you might have heard the term money printing. What do we peg the value of gold to? What do we peg the value of a dollar to, right? So typically we pegged paper dollars to gold, but that link was abolished many years ago. And so what's happened in our country is that our government continues just to print money, right? And continues to devalue the system. Well, Bitcoin is decentralized, and it also holds that system more accountable because cryptography, the science of it, allows us to assign a value to something and then send it to you without any kind of a middle person, but it also holds the value, because what Bitcoin does is it creates a store of value where there's a limited supply, right? That we know that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin forever and for always in our lifetime. There's nearly 19.5 million that exists. As roughly 1.5 million that still need to be mined or created. There is a group or a person, we're not certain, called Satoshi Nakamoto, who created Bitcoin and released it in 2009 as an open source code. Open source is good because that means it's available for everybody to examine and see, and nobody can corrupt it. Nobody can change the number of Bitcoin. Nobody can change the software that Bitcoin was programmed on. And so that's the great value of it. With gold, we find new strains of gold or veins of gold all over the world, all over the time, and that can affect the value of gold. There's also paper gold, where people say they have so much gold on hand. But with Bitcoin, we know definitively how many Bitcoin there are, and that's where the real value of Bitcoin can come in. If you had $1 trillion worth of gold versus $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin, it might take you months to ship $1 trillion of gold overseas to another country. But I could send $1 trillion of Bitcoin literally in a matter of minutes on the Lightning Network across the seas in a matter of minutes. So that's one of the values of Bitcoin. Why don't we move to the next one?
Great, Jim. I already have a quick question.
Yeah.
See, I'm in the novice. I'm not in this familiar. So sure. Bitcoin is Bitcoin the umbrella when you say Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin's limited? Is Bitcoin the umbrella, or is Bitcoin one and other cryptocurrencies there might be more than these 21 million?
Correct. Yes. Bitcoin is its own cryptocurrency, separate and apart from the other 25,000 some odd cryptocurrencies out there. Exactly.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. So you can kind of see what the market cap and the value of Bitcoin is here. These are the top 3 cryptocurrencies that are out today. Bitcoin, you've all heard of Bitcoin, I'm sure Ethereum, and Tether, which is actually pegged, I believe, to the US dollar. So you can see their market caps. You can see the current value, I believe, as of 6/14, but I believe now Bitcoin is hovering somewhere over around 25,000 and change. It's very volatile. It does go up and down, but as we move closer to what they call the halving, which we probably won't go into today, the price of Bitcoin is going to continue to go up because there's going to be less and less opportunity to mine it. But this is real simple. This is just the three major coins. If we move to the next slide, you'll see the 10 top cryptocurrencies by market cap. Again, this is as of June 13th. Some of these names may be familiar. Some of these different coins have kind of armies or people who are devoted to them, like XRP or Cardano. They have like a group on Facebook and on the internet that really advocates for their coins. Some have a greater value or greater business case, if you will, than others. There are people who I will say just real quick who are Bitcoin maxis, who believe that only Bitcoin can solve the world's currency problems. And then there are others who believe that Bitcoin is one solution, but there are other business case solutions like with Solana and others, where you can actually build businesses, digital businesses on top of the blockchain platform with a Solana that can move lightning speed much faster than any other computing speed than we have right now. And will eventually, that's where how your cell phone might be bounced off of the Solana network instead of cell phone towers and other ways like that. So some of them have that. Others, like the US dollar coin or Tether, are basically just kind of a medium of exchange, right? Dollar for dollar. You give me $1, I give you $1 of Tether. And that's how you would perhaps spend your money or make a donation, if you will, through crypto. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So as I said before, Bitcoin is probably, I would consider, one of the scarcest values in the world, because again, there will only ever be 21 million and nobody's going to create any more. It's considered censorship resistant because nobody can reprogram Bitcoin, right? Governments may decide that, or our government may decide to ban Bitcoin, may decide, oh, we're not going to allow anyone to hold or to spend Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin doesn't really care, right? Because El Salvador is adopting Bitcoin, China is mining Bitcoin, and other countries and other folks around the world are seeing the value of having this decentralized platform and the ability to move great sums of money at the speed of a matter of seconds. And so there are more and more folks that are adopting Bitcoin. There are even some businesses that are beginning to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet because they see the long-term growth value of it. But they say that when they say that Bitcoin is the hardest form of money on earth, it's because it can't be controlled. It can't be devalued. There's nobody who is the controller, the central controller of Bitcoin, where if you look at, say, Ethereum or Solana or one of these other coins, there is a group behind that who can control the amount of Solana on the network or the amount of Ethereum on the network, or change that. And if they change the number of Ethereum on the network, then that changes the value, right? If we go from 1 million Ethereum that are out there, and then suddenly they decide, you know what, let's release another 1 million, well, then suddenly your value of Ethereum is cut in half. Nobody can ever do that with Bitcoin. And that's where the real value is, because nobody owns it. And I put in at the bottom there, gold bugs make great Bitcoiners, because for years, gold bugs have been kind of this censorship resistant group who wanted to try to find a way or an avenue off of the US exchange network and retain their value through gold, right? And that's still a great investment. It hasn't gone up nearly as fast as Bitcoin. In fact, this year alone, I believe Bitcoin has rebounded about 60% off of its all-time low to its new high, and it's expected to continue to go up. But gold is still a great source of holding value. And so a lot of folks convert from being gold bugs to Bitcoin, and some folks hold both. Next. Joe?
All righty. Thank you so much, Jim. So you heard Jim talk a couple times now about this term blockchain or blockchain technology. And I think often this is where folks start to go, I have no idea what in the world this is. But this is critical for how digital currencies work and where we get some of these things that when it's done properly, that you're not having something that could be messed with, that could be accessed and things of that nature. So very quickly, We're not going to go super deep into today, but just I think the most important thing for the average fundraiser is to have a fundamental understanding of some of these basics. So just like fundraisers should know what the basics are about, say, a charitable trust, but not necessarily know how to do a contract for one or to set one of those things up to understand it, I think is important. So when you're dealing with blockchain technology, what happens here is that as Jim had talked about earlier, you can set up to be able to hold on to or own or even trade and give and take digital currencies through a digital wallet. In fact, I was just on Venmo the other day to set up for a birthday present for one of our colleagues, and right there on Venmo, right when I'm trying to pay, it's literally got a button right there that's like, hey, you could set up a crypto wallet, right here. And so that's how easy that's become. So think of it this way. A digital wallet is nothing more than it's an application. So it's something where you've got this information, or in this case, an asset that's sitting there for you. And as Jim had said before, that's send and receive that you can send to somebody. And then often when you're dealing with trading, then you're dealing with platforms, just like a stock exchange kind of thing. And that's the buying and selling and trading where you can also hold some of your assets and things of that nature. Cryptocurrency transactions are recorded in blocks. So think of a block, roughly speaking, like a ledger or almost like a batch. If you're batching charitable gifts and you're bringing them all together, the gifts that had come in for the day, and you're putting them together, and then somebody's going to quality control check that before you post it and do your deposits and stuff. Think of blocks, roughly speaking, in that fashion. So as you're looking at the screen here, somebody either requests a coin or you are giving a coin, and then that transaction goes to a block. And so it creates a block or a ledger or a batch. And then from there, it gets sent over to what they would call nodes in the network, or computers, or people who are involved in a network. It could be millions and millions and millions of computers or individuals that make up that network. And within that, different coins do this in different ways. But at the end of the day, that network community is working to validate that transaction. And when you validate for that transaction, in just a moment, I'm going to tell you a little bit about these different proofs you might hear, proofs of work, proofs of stake, and things of nature. But at the end of the day, what they're doing is they're validating it and they're locking it in so it cannot be tampered with, and it becomes immutable and it becomes permanent. Jim was talking about this earlier, like, you could do this and someone could say, well, you're not allowed to have it, and say, well, you really can't stop me from having this. And then when it becomes a blockchain, is that once it's been validated, it gets added on to an existing chain of blocks. And that transaction is complete. It is immutable. It is also transparent. And so that is how you get a coin, to say, how can you be sure when you go to transfer a coin, it's going to get there and someone's not going to snatch it in the ether on its way over? And this is the process in which it goes through. There's a lot more to this, as you can imagine, but on the very basics, just think of it as a blockchain is this way for you to be able to create a transaction and have it validated, and then have it locked in place so that somebody can't mess with it. Next slide. So a little bit about crypto mining and proof of systems, as I mentioned before. So the first thing that I think, I used to go like, crypto mining, what, like somebody digging in their backyard for like a thumb drive? I mean, what are we talking about here? Crypto mining are those nodes, those computer networks, folks within a network who are, and they say distributed network, so it's not centralized in one place. It's, it could be across the planet. And crypto miners are people or companies that have the equipment to help a network execute the transaction. So they do the validation. Is this a valid transaction for there? And they do that in a couple of different ways, and they can get paid in different ways. So this is like a stockbroker in a way, helping to execute a transaction. They're going to get a piece of that transaction or value. So the two biggest ones, and by the way, to do that, that's to make sure you don't get stuff stolen. The two most important ones right now are proof of work and proof of stake. So those are the systems in which you can do this. There are about a dozen different proof ofs, but these two are the ones we're going to focus on because the two biggest coins out there, Bitcoin and Ethereum. One uses proof of work and the other one uses proof of stake. So what are these? Proof of work is simply this. These miners, when a transaction comes through, before it's validated, they have a very, very, very complicated math problem. It's a 64-digit math problem. And in order to be the person who says that's validated, these different computers, they have to solve for that problem. And then they have that right to verify that transaction and lock it in. And so the reason why this is so hard to crack is that in order for you to be able to game the system, you would have to have control of 51% of the network. So imagine trying to have 51% of your control of a good chunk of the internet worldwide. Not likely. So that's the only way you would be able to kind of sneak in and upset the apple cart for this. The other side of this, oh, by the way, with the crypto miners, what do they get when they are the first to solve? They get a fee for the transaction, and they also get coins of the coin that's being transferred. So Bitcoin, for example, somebody gets a certain number of coins. There was a term that Jim used just a few minutes ago about halving. Very, very, very briefly on this. Halving means these miners, every time they do a transaction and they're helping with these things, once it's verified and they're the one chosen it's verified, they would get a certain number of coins at certain thresholds up to that 21 million coin limit. The payment to the miners in coins gets cut in half and cut in half and cut in half. And as the value of these coins keep going up, here's the other big thing about proof of work. And that is that it's now a competition for who's got the fastest computers to solve the problem. Because when you get 5 or 6 Bitcoins at $30,000 a piece, that's some serious cash we're talking about. We're not talking about a 1% commission fee here. That's some serious dollars. And so that's proof of work. And that's why it makes that so strong. But we're going to talk about the downside on that in a moment. Proof of stake is one where the competition is not about who solves the problem the fastest. It's that, are you part of that network already? And you're putting up coins that you own of that thing, such as Ethereum. And so the way in which somebody would potentially be able to crack a system that's on proof of stake is if you owned 51% of the crypto on that network. Now, this one here is still very hard, but easier on those itty bitty coin ones that are like the 25th thousandths project or something like that. But for the big ones, again, very hard to do that. That's why you see Ethereum is doing one proof of stake, and then you've got Bitcoin doing another proof of work, because they're big enough now that it's very, very difficult to be able to game them. There's no reward on proof of stake. You're not getting coins, but you do get a transaction fee. So there's not as much benefit for a miner for that, but there is that transaction where that can go on and on and on every time there's a transaction. Moving on. So if you could click, there we go. So what we want to do now is pivot for a few minutes and talk about this specifically. And don't worry, if you got questions about the stuff that Jim and I just went through, that's the stuff where you're like, we'll definitely get to you in the Q&A and be able to kind of break it out further to help you. We're going to take a couple of slides to talk about how does this relate to charitable giving. So within charitable giving, the profile of a crypto donor, I think, is really helpful to see first. And that is that, know a few of these things if you're wondering, like, should I be involved in this? The average income for someone who does have crypto is about $110,000. So I know in some areas of the country, that's nothing to write home about, but in other parts of the country, that's pretty good salary. And the average age is about 38. So you're looking at the leading edge of the millennial generation that is on the average there for there. Similar to stocks, about 30% of crypto giving that happens throughout the year traditionally is still happening in December. And much like stock and other kinds of assets where you don't see as much of it, when it does come through, it tends to be larger. This is not likely to be something you're going to get gifts in a $100 range. It's going to be, if someone's going to transfer a coin, if they transfer one Bitcoin, for example, That's like a $25,000 gift today, for that. So when they come, they'll come in chunks. They may not be very many, but they'll come in chunks. 45% of crypto users donate at least $1,000 to charity. So why is that important? Because on a percentage basis, that's higher than the general population of donors who would give it that amount level or higher. So what you've got is, if you've got someone donating crypto, they're in many ways behaving of what we see with gift planning that happens, plan giving donors. So if you've got somebody who's making a gift via an IRA, or they're making a gift through a donor advised fund, or through a private foundation, or through these other vehicles that are the really neat ways to be able to give, you tend to have a higher philanthropic priority and thinking that goes into it. And we see the very same thing here. So it's a very important thing to know, that when you see somebody donating with crypto, they're probably also the kind of person you want to talk to about for other ways in which they can really partner with you. We talked about the most popular coins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a stable coin. And if these adoption rates continue to increase, and there's no guarantee that it is, I mean, it could collapse, just like anything, it could collapse tomorrow. When we talk about, by the way, devaluing of a coin, what Jim is talking about there is values of coins can go up and down. It's as volatile as they come, right? It is a matter of, on the devaluing, is that it is that one person can't put their thumb on the scale. A central bank can't put their thumb on the scale to move monetary policy aspects of crypto. And so it can move in value. You just don't have an unnatural force against it. It's the marketplace dictating the ups and downs. And then the Giving Block, which is one of the platforms we'll mention briefly in a moment, estimates that about 5% of their longtime clients, they've got clients for both giving as well as other activities that they've got, they hold crypto for the long term, like it's an investment. It's not just a coin they're coming in and out of. And that becomes another attractive option for donors, because it has some features to it that is very attractive, that you get a double bonus from a tax perspective. The most important thing I want to do before I come off this slide is just know that, look at when you do have donors that would come up for this, that they're a new donor demographic, or one in which you really should be thinking about the way you would do anybody else who's indicating they're really thinking about philanthropy. They're not just responding to a specific request, but they're really more deeply taking charity very seriously. Next slide. So as a charitable asset, how does it get treated? It feels like stock. So if you've ever traded or seen the widgets and things of that nature, you put one in, you're putting it in, it's valued at X at that very moment, you put your transaction in, and seconds to minutes, it actually goes through. And that feels a whole lot like if you're going to sell stock or giving it to a charity who then liquidates that stock, but it's actually treated slightly different. So crypto is treated as a non-cash contribution of property, what we also know as in-kind. So card donations is one of the first things I think of, goodwill with clothes and things of that nature, but card donations is probably the better look, because when you deal with larger gifts of in-kind donations, there are other things that the IRS is going to be looking for. So like stock, in-kind contributions of property, if you've held on to it for more than a year and it was obtained for purchasing it, or you owned it for an investment, you could actually get fair market value for the time you, at the moment that you transfer that asset over to a charity. So imagine if you bought Bitcoin at 8 cents. Or 0.8 of a cent that it was valued back in 2009, and you hand it over as a charitable gift at $25,000 today, you are avoiding the income you would otherwise have to pay from the 8 pennies to 25,000, plus get a full deduction for that 25,000. If you owned it, or you purchased it, or that you otherwise owned it. It's a little different for the miners because they earned it in a different way, so it gets treated slightly different. But for most of your donors, this is the situation they're going to be in. They had bought it at some point, and so you've got that. Now, if it's less than a year, it's like doing stock for less than a year. You're just going to get the basis. You're going to get the deduction for what you paid for it, as opposed to the fair market value. But there are a couple things now that come into play. One of them is that, like a car, you're going to need to help a donor potentially with two forms. There's an 8282 form and there's an 8283 form. So an 8282 form is a nonprofit having to report to the IRS when you make a big in-kind gift. And that's how the government helps to make sure that people aren't gaming the system with in-kind gifts. And then 8283 is actually something, if you look closely, if you use TurboTax and you itemize, if you're giving to Goodwill and other things, you're actually completing an 8283. You just don't know it when you're typing in the stuff, but if you print your return out, you would see it. And that is the donor flagging for the IRS to say, these are my contributions for it. Crypto is treated just like all those other items that we said. And further, it's also required to have an appraisal if the value of that gift is more than $5,000, just like a car. Now you wonder, like, how in the world do you appraise a coin? Because you see the value of that. That is because it's treated this way. There is that requirement. On the next slide here, I'll tell you how you can deal with that. Go ahead. So how do platforms and nonprofits accept crypto? There's really three ways. I want to focus on bullet number one because that's going to be the vast majority of nonprofits. You could do the other two, but I'm telling you that the number one is going to be the best. And that is, there are several platforms now that help you to do this. So think of it this way, your online giving platform, right? Could you technically go out and get a little machine, run your credit card each and every time somebody wants to make a gift, and that your form online is just a text form? Yes, you could do that. That would be like bullet point number two. But the reality of it is you're going to use a platform to be able to create your giving pages, to be able to smoothly do those transactions, pledges, pledge payments, one-time gifts, you name it, right? Crypto's the same way. So there's several outfits that are doing this now, and they provide setup. They get you your online widget, so you have a little transaction thing that a donor can do, typically. Dashboards, IRS paperwork is done for you, makes it easier for you because it automatically generates it for you. Thank you letters, and the appraisals when needed. So that solves those kinds of things. It'll give you options for holding crypto if you wanted to, if as an organization you wanted to. That's called custody, or an immediate sell order. It's like, no, we're going to convert this into USD. We're not playing with volatility. And so they give you those things. And many of these platforms also allow you to have subgroups within your organization or programs, or in my case at the Archdiocese of Washington, I can offer this to each and every parish to have their own widget. Now it still comes through our books, but otherwise it is all for them and their own programming. And so these are some of the things that the platforms do for you. And there's why that's of value to that. But you can set up a wallet and you could accept it that way. But remember, you'd have to fill out these forms manually. It's not impossible. They're not that difficult, but you'd have to really think through it. Third party, last point on this on the slide, there are many donor advised funds institutions now that are offering to say, if you want to set up a donor advised fund with us and you want to fund your donor advised fund with crypto, we'll take that, we'll put that in there for you, and then you can then suggest the gifts that you want to go out to different charities. You can have donors who are crypto donors go through a donor advised fund to give to their favorite charity. So that's coming up too. Okay, go on. So we're at the point here of the first part of the panel discussion, which is to talk about a couple of the real world experiences of this, given that there's so many fundraisers on the call going, if I were to think about this, what did you guys do to go through it? I'll do my best to share with you some of the things I know that Rachel had worked with. She and I have two different systems on that, so I can point to that. And Jim is going to come from the perspective of being in the space. He joined me. There was a conference back in November called the Catholic Crypto Conference. Believe it or not, there's actually a conference for it. And Jim was there, was a major part of it. Also got to hear the buzz in the hallways and in the rooms, and is going to be bringing some of those perspectives that he heard to the table that might help you with your consideration in this.
Great. And I would love at this point to remind you that if you have questions, you want to raise your hand, we can call on you. You can ask your questions if there's something pressing. Laura, I'm calling on you because I think that I saw you. And I'm going to invite you onto stage with us if you want to talk or turn on your camera. Let us know what you're thinking.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm Laura Lang. I'm with the School Sisters of Notre Dame. And I actually have two questions. The first is, so is it my understanding if you're using a platform like the Giving Block
Mhm.
and someone wants to give you a gift, they will sell it and we just get the check like a stock gift?
So it depends on how you want to receive it. So the Giving Block, a Giving Block is one of the platforms. It's one of the biggest ones. So the two, let me pause here. The two biggest right now are in Given and the Giving Block. So if you were to type in crypto donation platform, Giving Block probably pops up first, and then and Given is there. And so they're there. So you would have two options when it comes to that. So when that gift comes through that platform, it would be, you can choose to accept it as a custody, which would mean it would transfer over. There would be a 3% merchant fee, or whatever the percentage is. If you've got a premium plan or more of a basics plan, that rate might be a little bit different, but there's a merchant fee like you would have for a credit card. And then you can have the choice to say, I don't want to sell it. I'm going to keep it in an account, keep it as crypto. Or you can have it set up to say, I want to immediately liquidate it the moment it comes through. And so there are people that have strong feelings one way or the other for that. And that's where individual organizations, really would need to go, what are we comfortable with? So for example, Laura, for us at the Archdiocese, we do not hold anything in custody. And it's not because necessarily we are for or against crypto. It's that we have an investment committee, and that all of our stock is the same way too. We don't hold a stock to go, oh, I think that's going to appreciate in value. We liquidate it. We put it either into a program, or if it's into an endowment, it allows for our investment committee to invest it based on the plan that they're following. And if I just gave them coins and say, add this to the investment pool, I might throw that off. So we as an organization, we have a sell order immediately upon it coming through. And it's got the side benefit. I don't worry about market volatility in that case. But you don't have to do it that way.
Laura, what was your second question? And then we'll go to Sister Kathy.
Okay, so I guess, but along those lines, if you're just getting a check, is it still considered an in-kind gift?
Yes. Yes, so it is, and that's why I said it feels like stock because of the way it transfers, but the IRS treats it as in-kind giving. And so while it has so many of those features of stock, just remember that it is considered an in-kind gift. And I don't anticipate the IRS is going to change their mind on that anytime soon.
Okay. And then real quickly, how do you get your leadership to buy into this new fangled
question?
Jim,
I know that's
Jim, let's turn to you on that.
Because, sure, Joe.
Yeah, because you probably heard a lot of people that might have said, I like what I see. How do I convince?
Yeah.
And because I could tell you what would happen here, but I think you got a deeper perspective than I do here.
Well, thanks. I'll give it my best shot. So I think they've got to get an education basically on what crypto is before they're going to be ready to invest in it. I think it is going to get only easier. We are still at the infantile stages of cryptocurrency revolutionizing into our system. Everybody's familiar probably with BlackRock, the largest investment firm in the world. They've got their fingers in everything. They just applied for a spot ETF for Bitcoin, which means that their major investors, if that goes through the SEC, their major investors will be pouring billions of dollars into Bitcoin, which even further legitimizes Bitcoin. I think that really needs to happen in order for more of the traditional investment folks to look at Bitcoin as a store of value, as a long-term asset store of value. Once that happens, I believe we're going to really, it's going to blow the lid off of Bitcoin, the value, and what we're going to see, I think, also very quickly is that the scarcity of Bitcoin will become even more real, because it's going to get eaten up and purchased and scooped up by some of these larger investment firms. But really, to answer your question, it needs to begin with education. I would identify somebody on your board or somebody in your community who could come and maybe perhaps do a short workshop at one of your board meetings. Maybe it's just 15 minutes on Bitcoin. I would also tune into the Catholic Crypto Conference. If you just Google it, you'll find it. It comes up right away, as Joe said. I had the great opportunity of being one of the moderators at that conference. And I had, as Joe said, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of different folks. It's more of a revolution, and it's going to take a couple more years before it becomes normalized. I'll give you just a quick analogy. I started my career as a youth minister at a parish back in the 90s. And I remember when the internet first started coming up, and I convinced my pastor to get a dial-up modem so that we could begin to send emails and start to put up our first parish website. And he said, Jim, do you think that the internet is going to stick around? So we laugh about that now. That was almost 30 years ago. But I think we're going to look at cryptocurrency with that same perspective. Our kids and our grandkids are going to laugh about that perspective around cryptocurrency. It's an inevitability. Many places are stopped. It's not such a big stretch to think that at one point we may phase out cash, because there are many organizations that are starting to phase that out. So I think it begins with education. Perhaps I don't think you want to necessarily be the champion of cryptocurrency. I think you need to find folks who can help educate your board. Sorry for the long answer.
Yeah.
Well, that was great. I want to invite Sister Kathy to ask your question. You might need to unmute yourself. I think I cannot. There you go.
Yes.
That's it.
At the very beginning, you said there were 25,723 projects, and 98% of them will go to value will go to a value of 0 in the near future. What is a project?
So an individual cryptocurrency. So there are so many out there. You've seen Dogecoin, Shiba Inu, Catcoin, you name it. Those are all projects out there. Bitcoin is a project, but those 25,000. And the reason I say they're going to go to value, and that's my own personal opinion, but there's a lot of folks who believe the same thing, is that they're not sustainable, and many of them are scams. What happens is they start something like, let's call it Shiba Inu. And then you get these big whales who come in and they'll buy millions of dollars of Shiba Inu to pump up the price. And then they'll build these little armies. People get excited about, oh yeah, let's buy Shiba Inu. The prices are going up, and people start FOMOing, or so because they're afraid of missing out. So they start buying a bunch of Shiba Inu. Then those whales sell their Shiba Inu and dump it on the market, and everybody gets left holding the bag, and the value just plummets. And so that's what I mean by them being scams. They're get-rich-quick scams, I think, by some very wealthy individuals. And we see that same narrative going on and on and on. That's why I think there's only going to be maybe 2 to 3% left in the market, whether it be Bitcoin for certain, most likely Ethereum, and maybe a handful of other coins that will ultimately survive, who have either a store of value or a good business case, like a Solana, where they're building business platforms on top of it and it has real-world value.
Yeah.
So it's like businesses. It's not folks that have
Correct.
Exactly.
A bank account there or something.
Correct. Yeah. Like a business, like I mentioned, you may eventually see a cell phone network on top of a blockchain, and that may be how we get our signal, believe it or not. It's incredible.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. I want to continue to invite people to raise your hands as you want to. One quick clarification on that, Jim and Joe. As recipients of the donations, we don't necessarily have to worry, tell me if I'm wrong, about whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or one of these others. Just like if somebody's donating a car, we're not so worried if it's a Ford or a Cadillac. It's ultimately just the value when it's given to us. Is that right?
Correct. There are a couple of things when we talk about kind of getting into crypto and deciding to be able to do that. There's going to be a number of different factors you want to look at, right? And so one of those items would be about, are there certain things that we don't want to accept? Because this is where, like, one of the first things you want to do is look at giving acceptance policies. There are organizations that say we're going to accept this, but not that. And sometimes maybe on a mission basis, you might say, I'm going to accept this, but not that. So, some of that would come into play, but generally speaking, you're talking about an asset. And as long as it's got an asset with value and it comes through, and if you're liquidating right away, you're turning it back into USD, for example, to go right into your programming, there might be a mission reason why you would not do that. So take, for example, an environmental organization. Environmental organization might say, we're either not going to do crypto because there's so much of an energy use in the mining, in those transactions. As I mentioned before, there's a bit of like a arms race of computing power to try to be the first one to crack a code for a transaction because there's a lot of money in it. Suddenly, it's not just some guy in the middle of the night with his laptop. It's somebody with a small city out in the desert, doing God knows how much energy to be able to be the first there. And that takes a lot of energy, and that's got some secondary effects. So maybe an organization says, it's not for us, not because we don't want to accept it. It's that our mission, it really goes counter. Or they say, we will accept it, but we can't accept ones that do proof of work, which is the one that's energy intensive. And so proof of work, which right now would be probably the most difficult thing to do because Bitcoin is proof of work, and that's the biggest one by far. So if you say, I'll accept it, but not that, you'll probably have a lot of people go,
Yeah, that's the big daddy. Yeah,
like,
that's going to be
what
tough.
am I supposed to do to give to you, right? So
Yeah, if I could just also add to that, when you sign up with a giving block, you would go through exactly which cryptocurrencies you would accept. And you might decide, I'm just going to keep it to a very small number. But yeah, you have to actually have to receive those kind of coins. You have to have a particular wallet that can receive it. So I couldn't send Ethereum to a Bitcoin wallet. So that's why they have to set it all up on the back end so that you decide initially. One thing with I spent a little time with the giving block back in the fall, and they said that the number of customers that they have has grown exponentially over the last couple of years. They have over 2,000 nonprofit clients right now that are accepting cryptocurrencies, just to give you a sense of how many others are in this space.
yeah.
Great, thank you. And I had a couple other questions that I wanted to ask here. Why decide to offer Bitcoin at all?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And this should be the first question you even ask yourself. Why do we want to do this? Now, there's going to be some of the arguments, as you saw there, how, this as an industry is growing up in many ways, growing pains too, the ups and downs, right? But is not something that was a 2 or 3 year fleeting thing. So that might be an argument where you go, okay, it really is something that maybe I should take seriously. I can tell you this, the answer to this is going to be different for different people. I'll tell you what mine was, and it is to this day. I accepted, and I went through the process to accept it, not because I thought we were going to get oodles of gifts and it was just going to change the dynamic of the church tomorrow. In fact, I didn't have a single person asking me about it. I just wanted to be ready so that when somebody did say, I'd like to be able to fund this program using crypto, can I do that? When it comes to crypto or any other asset, if it's easy for me to be able to accept, liquidate, and put into a program, whether it's stock, IRA giving, donor advised fund, things that come through, the different ways of online giving, you name those kind of different assets. They're the things that I want to be able to say yes more often. So for me, I don't feel strongly one way or the other about crypto on its own merits, but that it's an asset and I want to make it easy. And what I tell you I didn't want is someone to come to me and say, I want to go make this donation, but this is the asset I need to use. And then I would say, I haven't looked into that yet. I need to go take 2 months or maybe 6 months to get approvals. By that time, that gift's gone. So for me, it was about, I want to be there when a donor wants to come to me. And so I just see it, I'm agnostic as it relates to, the arguments about pro con on crypto. To me, it's an asset to support a good program.
Right.
I'll just take a more, so I'll take maybe the different side of that argument. I do think, I agree with everything Joe said. I think it creates a relevance for us because we do want to attract that younger demographic of donor. And I think if it is an inevitability, I think everybody on this call, if your nonprofit is around in 10 years, most likely you will be wired for crypto in some way. So I think we all at some point need to be ready for that day. Does it have to be tomorrow? Absolutely not. But I do think we need to head in that direction. But for me, my own personal journey has been around understanding the macro economy and understanding our US debt, why gasoline shot to $5 a gallon in some states around the country recently. Still, I think in my home state of Arizona, my parents are paying that. Why the loaf of bread has gone up, why the national debt, and how that debt of what I think it's over $31 trillion has an impact, and how Bitcoin can play a role in that in helping us to solve some of our economic issues. So I've kind of become a student of that macroeconomic space over the last 2 years. I was not I was an English major. I was not a macroeconomics guy. but I have really found in my old age here just a fascination in understanding how the country works and how money works. And if you're a lifelong learner, I think you would also enjoy that journey as well. So I would encourage you to do that.
That's interesting. Sister Kathy, did you have a follow-up for us?
Yes, yes. Wouldn't these folks who come to you and want to give to you a big amount or whatever in crypto, wouldn't they have other opportunities of gifting?
Potentially.
They also have a ton of stock as well.
Yeah, potentially, but potentially not. So think about like your donors you have today. You might have someone that has no problem scratching a $25,000 check out of their checking account for you, and then somebody else that goes, you know what, I'm not going to take it from my cash reserves. I want to give stock. They might have it and they may not want to use that. They might have a blue chip. There may be a number of reasons, but I think when you look at it, I can tell you this, I don't have someone goes, I want to give you $25,000 and it's going to come in the form of stock. And let's just say, for example, it's a gift that I do want to accept. So there's certain things, if you want to come to me with $25,000 worth of stamps, I would say, well, hold on a second. We're not built for this. I'd have to take a look and see how we'd be able to liquidate this. But say it's something that I would immediately say yes to. I wouldn't say to a donor, yeah, you can give that Merck stock to me, but I'd much rather you just go tap your IRA. Why don't you got an IRA, right? Why don't you give it to me from your IRA? I wouldn't say that to them. If they were to ask me and say, what are the benefits of one or the other? I can share with them the different facets of it and what makes one attractive for certain people, another one. But I'm not going to tell someone like, hey, why don't you give me it this way instead of that way? And so that, for me, it would be about if someone's coming forward and I can accept it, I'm not going to sit there and try to tell them, you give me this instead, unless I don't accept it. And then we could talk about, is there something else that you want to do to make that project be what you want it to be, that you want to support?
Great. So I'm looking at our time. We have a couple more minutes. So we're going to do a little bit of a speed round here. If you'll each let me know what platform you actually use. You mentioned a few of them.
Sure.
Or maybe even more importantly than which one is, what were the factors that you were looking at to make your decision?
Sure. I'll take this one in about 30 seconds, for it. So the platform we use at the Archdiocese is Engiven, E-N-G-I-V-E-N. We chose that one largely because they took security very, very seriously when I was doing research for it. At the time, there were no platforms that had cyber liability insurance. And Engiven was the first one to say, let us try to get that. Because while they've got a platform behind them and there's other security protocols, donor data still goes through their system, even if it's so briefly. And if they get hacked, that donor data still can be exposed. And I wanted those protections in place. And so they were the first ones to get to that, to get the yes on that. Secondly, they were really helpful with supporting me. As my bureaucratic process here took forever, it felt like they were very like, no problem, we're here when you're ready. And they worked towards the things I needed. And the last part was they allowed me to have the ability to give any parish, school, or ministry their own widget, their own sub account that could be completely separated, that they can see. And so that made that another service opportunity for me for parishes. Like we will do charitable gift annuities on behalf of parishes. We will do stock liquidation on behalf of parishes. They did that too. The giving block, I will say this, Abby, on the giving block side, because I did research them as well, I know that many go with it because their widget is really looks nice. They are the first thing that pops up. They have other side of the coin are people who own it, not just to go through that platform to donate to you. So they've got like charitable funds that they share with all the users in December. And so that oftentimes may pay for the annual fees. Annual fees for each one of them is not too steep. And then the merchant fees are about the same. So those weren't things that made me go one way or the other. For me, it was security and the patience, because my organization takes a long time.
Great. And Jim, anything you would add there? And then I'm actually going to skip our last question on this slide and let us wrap up. But would you add any other factors that you've talked to people about?
I would echo everything that Joe said, and I would look at the customer service is obviously a big factor because and when you're on this learning curve, you need to make sure that they are accessible and not just the sales team, but the folks behind the sales team that are going to support you in this integration. And also spend some time with your board and spend some time with your finance department to make sure that you have the policies in place, whether you're going to sell it immediately or which crypto assets you're going to sell immediately, so that that's all in place when you receive that first donation.
That's great, thank you. I'm going to hand it back to you to wrap us up here.
Sure. So you see on this slide here, definitely take a look at this after we send it. So, because we do want to still save that last minute for that last question. And Abby's going to pitch something that gives you a chance, if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, that there's another chance next week where we'll be here to be able to talk through stuff. Just know that there are other things that come up. And one thing I did want to note, so this, like, how do you convince your board? The other thing to take into account, because of negative perceptions or a lot of ignorance, you will get people who will challenge the decision to go forward in hindsight, like an armchair quarterback kind of thing. And one example I'll give was when the coins went down in value very quickly last fall by about 30 or 40%, I had people saying, "You're still doing that crypto thing? Like, isn't that like really down?" And I'd be like, when the stock market went down in 2009, did you dump your broker? Like, did you just stop accepting stock? No, it's that the values might be lower, but it's not valueless. So I'm not dropping the platform just because of volatility, unless every single solitary coin out there is $0. Then yeah, then there's no platform. But just know that too, that you will continue to have people challenge you, and also know from a church environment, as a pitfall, you will have some people, you will get these calls. And so you need to be ready for it, that will see this as no more than gambling. They don't see it as investing. They don't see it as an asset. They think it's get rich quick. It's a Ponzi scheme. And that, how dare you as a church encourage people to do this? I say, we're not encouraging anybody to do anything. I'm accepting an asset if somebody has it. And I'm literally there. And if someone disagrees with that, I understand and I respect their point of view on it, but that's where I stand. The answer to that question is just as important for you to answer it, not just what Joe says. It's also part of, should we accept it or not? How do you feel and your organization feel about that?
Great, thank you. Jim, I want to give you a chance we got our participant Q&A, for any closing thoughts.
I guess one of the ways that I've learned is just you need to follow the money, right? And so one of the questions that everybody will come to eventually is, should we put some Bitcoin on the balance sheet? And I mentioned BlackRock and its spot ETF in the future. That may not be such a distant future where foundations might have the opportunity to put some Bitcoin into their investment pool. And looking at where large organizations are now spending billions and trillions of dollars, and it's a lot of it's ready to be put into Bitcoin. I would just look at that, watch her, and learn about it. Really put your education hat on and begin to understand the macro of where we're at as a country and our world, why things are going up in inflation, and how Bitcoin is really can be a part of that solution. So thanks.
Thank you, Jim. You're making me think of my college macro. It was actually my micro professor who told us to read the paper. He said, you're not going to understand it. Read it anyway. Keep reading it slowly. And each day a new word will start to make sense to you. So you're re-inspiring me to get back into that economics. This you're going to get a chance to look at because we're going to share out, but lots of other resources and further reading that you can do and learn about. Thank you to all three of you who put this together, the two of you who were able to be here in real time with us today. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jim. And one last plug, that as we are I will share out the recording of this, and I will share out the deck so that you can look back at those resources. And we'll gather again next Thursday at 10 a.m. to have a coffee talk, go into some small groups, share who else is on this call doing anything or not doing anything, or where you're stuck or where your questions still remain. So don't hesitate to go to tnpa.org, click on our calendar of events. If you can remember that whole link right there that says members.tnpa.org/events, you can go directly there. And RSVP, we would love to see you on Zoom with a cup of coffee next Thursday morning. And if you're on the West Coast, very early Thursday morning. So thank you, everybody. And thank you especially to Joe and Jim for sharing your time and what you know with us. It is much appreciated. And we look forward to talking again soon.